Alright, section 7 of the EMD 64 645 cubic inch engine, camshaft gear train, auxiliary drive camshaft assembly contents, the camshaft gear train description manual for the camshaft drive gear for the removal of the inspection, installation, spring drive gear disassembly, inspection, assembly, and installation. Number 1, idle gear bearing clearance check for the removal of the inspection and installation, idle gear subshaft for the removal of the inspection, bearing and sleeve, replacement, installation. Crankshaft gear removal, the inspection and installation, crankshaft and camshaft gear train assembly, and auxiliary drive gear description, maintenance, camshaft description, removal, the inspection, assembly, installation, counterweight, application, exhaust valve time, locating top dead center, checking the valve time, and timing valve service data, specifications of equipment. Alright, Electric Motive Division, GM, Engine Maintenance Manual, Section 7, the camshaft, gear train, auxiliary drive, and camshaft assembly, the camshaft gear train, the description, power necessary to drive the camshaft without the turbocharger before it is to come with the free wheel link supplied with the gear train with the rear of the engine, figure 7 with one show with the gear train with becomes before the camshaft drive with the housing turbocharger installed with the figure 7 the tube with the show with the cross section with the gear train, and figure 7 1 consists of the crankshaft gear mount with the crankshaft number 1 idler gear. Show this show 7-1 with the camshaft gear train, the crankshaft gear, the number 1 idler, the turbocharged drive gear with the number 2 idler gear, the spring assembly, the camshaft drive gear for the spring drive gear assembly, and the spring device for the gear with assembly left and right, camshaft drive gear for the spring drive gear assembly is made up of the number 2 idler gear with the spring assembly with the turbocharged driver gear. Maintenance, unless complete with the engine disassembly is being undertaken, then it's unlikely the entire gear train would be removed with the engine at one time with the exemption of the number 2 idler gear with the turbocharged drive gear with with the spring drive gear assembly. Each of the gear that can be removed independently. With any of the gears are removed with the gear train, they should be inspected successfully. Backlash upon the reassembly. Inserting the feeler gauge the entire the width of the gear face. The excessive backlash can cover the improper valve of the operation injection period. Backlash clearance length for the given the surface of the tab of the page for the end of the section clearance between the gauge for the subshaft, the bearing, and the thrust clearance will also be maintained with the specified limits. Note the refer to the number 1 idle gear for the bearing of the clearance without disassembly. The turbocharged with the aftercooler auxiliary drive with assembly with the cooling. The disc must be removed from the engine and facilitate access for the camshaft gear. So for the number 1 idler gear with the crankshaft gear is required. The camshaft gear, the oil retaining the camshaft drive housing must be removed. The engine timing will not be disturbed during the idle gear removal as long as the camshaft and the crankshaft is not moved when the gears are removed. The original idler gears are to be reapplied if the desire to retain the timing, the market orientation for the future work of the market with the gears with it lie before the removal. Alright, this shows figure 7-2. Let's back out. Alright, starting with the left side, you see the oil seal, retainer pin, the oil slinger, the shimmer of the necessary clearance point. This is from the start of the crankshaft gear. Then above that, you have the number 1 idler stub shaft bearing, number 2 idler gear with this makes the spring assembly, and the turbocharged gear with just make up the spring drive gear assembly with the idler gear stub shaft assembly bracket, and then the camshaft stub shaft bracket, thrust bearing, camshaft stub shaft, camshaft drive gear. Now we're going to move back into the following paragraph contains the removal of the inspection installation procedure for each of the gear in the train, the camshaft, the drive gear, with the removal of the lock wire with the 4 bolts holding the counterweight with the camshaft, the drive gear, with the subshaft, remove the dowel points, and the retaining plate with the counterweight with the camshaft, the drive gear, with the not be removed from the subshaft, with the remove of the dowel with the counterweight with the camshaft, the drive gear, with the driving them out from the backside with the gear inspection, with the inspect the gear with the teeth, and with the key identification cranks for the other evidence of the failure. If possible, magnaflux inspection should be performed. Additional above with all the track with the camshaft gear with the mace for the auxiliary drive gear with the weir with the set for the normal discoloration due with the narrow gear mating with the wide gear when it should be not considered as wear as the step. The accurate measure can be made with using a 420 thousandths of an inch to 430 thousandths of an inch diameter roller. Place the roller unworn with the portion of the gear tooth with the suspended with over the portion of the distance between the roller and the worn gear tooth that should not exceed the limit given the surface of the tab. If the wear steps exceed with the wear limit of the camshaft gear, the auxiliary drive gear should be replaced with the plating of the gauging with the gouging of the camshaft gear teeth with the auxiliary drive gear maze that indicate the misalignment of the cause should be determined before the applying the replacement gear installation. Install the camshaft drive gear on the stub shaft to be sure of the position of the subshaft on the position line, marking lines up with the markings on the mating parts as shown in figure 721. Installing the counterpart on the tab stub shaft with the counterweight in the subshaft marked aligned. Install the dowel pin for the retainer plate with the counterweight of the subshaft bolts with the torque bolts to 90 foot-pounds of torque. Install the dowel pins torque to 22 17 foot-pounds of torque lock wire mounting bolts of the dowel bolts in the group of three mounting bolts with the one of the dowel bolt with any with the gear camshaft, the gear of the gear train with the arc, replace with the relationship with the crankshaft with the camshaft that has been distributed with the refer to the exhaust valve timing at the end of the section with the information for the position marking of the gears. Your spring drive gear assembly. The spring drive gear assembly figure 7.3 with the number 2 idler with the turbocharged drive gear with the spring assembly with the mount between the two gear with the absorb the torsional variation which may be transmitted through the gear assembly with the turbocharged the spring drive gear with assembly should be removed with the assembly with the disassembly. The inspection figure 7.3 shows the spring drive gear assembly. Disassembly. The removal of the spring drive gear assembly from the stub shaft with the check with the loose with the gear to spider bolts discard any loose bolts unnecessary with the boost may be covered the loose bolts caught with the movement of the spider due to the high loads will have damage of the threads. Damage of the bolts will result in the unsatisfactory clamp load. Remove the lock wire for the 8 of the 1/2 inch 1/3 bolts for the whole of the turbocharger of the drive gear for the outer spider with the remove the snap the ring with the inner circumference of the gear with the turbocharger of the drive gear can be now be separated from the assembly. Next, remove the spring assembly from the idler gear with the remove the 5/8 inch 11 bolts from the 12 dowel for the idler gear with the show of the necessary with the further disassemble the spring drive gear with the assembly with the spider spring with the spring seat. The making up the spring assembly do not require any of the routine type of the maintenance for the spring drive gear assembly is found to be defective. It should be replaced with a qualified assembly as in warning. Any attempt to disassemble the spring of assembly, use the visor for the clamps, the rams, pinch bar that can be exerted the hard hazard but not recommended. Inspection for the gear teeth fatigues, indication cracks, appears for the evidence of failure. If possible, the Magnaflux inspection should be performed on the gears. Inspect the idle gears bearings to see that they are not degoused or damaged in any way. They also check the oil hole to see that they are not plugged. Assembly through the clean 4 5/8 11 idler to the mounting bolt. Remove all the trace with the thread of lubrication. Use the cleaner activated for listed within the surface data. Also clean the spider bolt holes with the lubricating contamination. We use the same cleaner. Splitting slide spring of assembly over the idle gear hub with the apply with the sealing compound of 5/8 11 bolt for the install of the bolt to the idler gear with the liner's inner spider with the torque of the number to 165 pound with the torque. If the same idler and the spring assembly are used with the install of the gear spider to the dowel with the 1/4 inch below the surface of the element stake with the dowel pin holes in their 3 plate with 120 degrees apart. If the new idler gear of the spring assembly is being used with the 2 drill, the 2 hole through the gear web into the spider with the drill at 1 5/16 of an inch deep line ream with the hole of the 1 9/32 of an inch deep and place the 32 locate all the holes at 3 inches 937 thousandths of an inch and plus or minus 3 thousandths of an inch above the below of the idler gear with the center line with the 2 gear mounting bolt for the drive with the 2 dowel with the 1/4 inch below the surface of the snake hole for the 3 places with the 120 degrees apart. Install the turbocharger with the drive gear on the idler gear hub. Install the snap ring with the idler gear with the hub gear with the plow the thread with the lubricating with the bolt threads. The washer surface install the 8 1/2 inch 13 by 1 1/4 inch bolt with the hardening washer to replace the 1/8 of an inch bolt with the usually the early model for the head washer through the turbocharged drive gear into the outer spider with the torque of the bolts to 82 foot-pounds of torque of the lock wire in the bolt walls and bolt heads. Install place the spring drive gear onto the idler with the gear shaft with being sure of the tooth position mark on the hour line that shown figure 721. If the new gear is used with the exhaust valve with the timing at the end of the section information from the positioning marking with the gear, the timing procedure not required in the camshaft. The camshaft position have not been distributed. Number 1 idler gear with the bearing of the clearance checkout with the valve that disassemble the number 1 idler gear with the bearing clearance can be checked without the disassembly of the engine. Move the gear left flank of the bank of the oil pan with the bank handle the cover over the rod assembly with the camshaft of the driving housing so the end of the flat inside of the bottom of the position the rod so that the back of the mount with the travel with the crankcase end plate with the top of the rod contact for the side of the number 1 idler gear figure 7.4 hand tighten with the bracket bolt. Apply the light tension spring bolt between the lower and the part of the rod edge of the hole and then figure 7.4 with the maintain the idler gear to the rod contact. No, photo at the right was taken without the camshaft drive housing and to the illustration rod assembly to the idle gear. Application 7.4 up application from the parts of the phone for the checking of the bearings column. There's the picture on the left show of the rod assembly number 1 idle gear bracket mount on the crankshaft gear and then on the right show of the brake mount with the rod assembly spring and the dial indicator support clamp. Secure the support clamp with the dial indicator with the edge of the handhold opening position for the indicator plunge for the contact with the flattened side of the rod figure 7.4 with the cylinder test valve used to close the U with the engine turning of the bar manually rock with the crankshaft and many times it's necessary to remove the oil from the idler gear bearing. This will be the evidence of the dial indicator with no increase of the other previous reading taken from the either direction with the crankshaft travel. 6. Bar the crankshaft slightly the one direction until there is no other further dial indicator movement so that set the indicator to 0 but the crankshaft in the opposite direction until there is no further dial indicator movement. No Reading, and note the reading. Multiply the reading by 1.3 to obtain the number 1 idler gear bearing clearance. From a further limit the server to data. It may be necessary to lock the left bank of the camshaft in order to provide the sufficient load on the number 1 idler gear to obtain the full movement of this should be done clearance, but does not have fall within limits of the server to data. The idler gear is removed to refer to the following procedures. Remove the four bolts of the washer holding the thrust plate with the idle gear. Remove the thrust plate with the idle gear from the stub shaft. Inspection. Inspect the gear teeth with the fatigue indication with cracks and pits. The other evidence of failure, possible negative flux inspection should be performed. The installation camshaft of the gear train with assembly information with a couple complete installation procedure for the idle gear and subshaft of the assembly. Move the after the spring drive of the assembly. Note if the numbered 1 idler attached to the oil lines have been removed. The subshaft of the assembly can be taken off. Remove the lock wire dowel pins for the locating with the dowels. Remove the mounting bolts of the subshaft assembly. Inspection. Check whether the oil passages are not plugged. Check the alignment of the oil holes in the upper subshaft of the sleeve with the holes in the subshaft. Inspect the sleeve with the next gauges. Inspect the upper subshaft seal of the replacement. If necessary, check with the bearing of the lower subshaft sleeve on the upper subshaft to see that they are not gouged or damaged in any way. Number 1 subshaft bearing replacement. Remove the press plate with the bearing from the subshaft of the heating the bearing until they can be removed. Install the new bearing by the heating bearing to oil of 300 degrees to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, pressing on the subshaft, making sure that the oil hole from the bearing is at 12 o'clock position. Number 2 subshaft surface replacement. Remove the 3/8 inch job with the pin sleeve to the subshaft. Heat the sleeve until remove the subshaft. Install the new sleeve heat sleeve into the 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Press for the subshaft oil holes in the sleeve that should be aligned within 132 centimeters in the hole of the fastened subshaft and the new dowel. Installation. New subshaft assembly is applied with the sheath of the camshaft gear train assembly. This installation procedure of the subshaft assembly with the remove of the engine to be reused. Set the following installation procedures. Apply subshaft assembly with the crankcase with the 3 vertical center mount with the bolts and the finger tighten. Apply with the lower idle gear with the subshaft assembly to mesh with the crankshaft gear. Place the failure gauge to play between the lower idle and the crankshaft with the gear teeth to check for the backlash and backslash limit and sort of the data. If necessary, reposition the subshaft assembly until the allowable backslash is obtained. Apply with the remaining subshaft assembly mounting bolts with the torque all bolts. Install the dowel bolts. Lock wire all the bolts. Apply the oil lines to the subshaft bracket. The crankshaft gear. Remove the crankshaft gear from the crankshaft of the oil slinger. Can be removed from the crankshaft gear by removing the oil slinger to the crankshaft gear bolts. Inspect the condition of the gear teeth with the fatigue indication cracks for the pits with other evidence of failure. If possible, magnaflux inspection should be performed. Inspection for the oil slinger of the oil seals to retain it to see that they are not damaged in any way. Installation. See if the camshaft gear train assembly information complete the installation procedure. Camshaft gear train assembly. If the complete gear train it has to be disassembled, not including the camshaft subshaft. The brackets for the following procedure should be with the installation in line with the various components. Subshaft bracket application. Inspect for the crank flaps and plates for the mirrors and damaged areas. Clean the dirt and debris for the hole for the end of the plate and the end plate surface. Wipe the crankshaft with the gear teeth clean with insert the coupling bolts into the gear with the backside with install the proper position with the end on the crankshaft that's shown figure 721. The secure with the crankshaft gear with the 2 notes and the moderately tighten if the new gear with the exhaust to refer to the exhaust valve timing the end of the section for the information on positioning the marking with the gears. The time of the procedure not required for the camshaft position have not been distributed. Inspect the subshaft bracket with the rear of the surface of the burrs and wipe clean. Make sure all the oil passages are clean and free of the dirt. Install the 2 temporary lock pins, figure 7.5, into the idler gear subshaft of the bracket, mounting hole for the crankshaft end plate with install the subshaft bracket. In position, apply the 3 vertical centered 1/2 inch 20 mounting bolt with a Harding washing with the finger tighten with the mounting bolts. Apply the idler gear file 768 with the number 1 idler gear subshaft figure 7.6 with the place the feeler gauge between the idler gauge teeth and the crankshaft gear teeth to check with the gear backlash for the specified and the data at the end of the section. Or 758 and 7.5. The idler subshaft bracket application show the temporary locating pins. 7.6 shows the checking number 1 idler gear to the crankshaft gear package to gauge number 768. Alright, note that number 1 idler gear may be used with the gauge if the down available. If the backlash is not within the limits specified by the general tap of the subshaft of the bracket with the brass hammer until the position to obtain the proper backlash. Do not tap with the machine surface with the subshaft bracket. When the subshaft bracket is properly aligned, tighten the bottom bolt with the proper torque with the recheck with the backlash. Apply with the idler gear, the subshaft with the camshaft with the subshaft gear. 769, figure 77, check the dimensions between the number 2 idler gear, subshaft with the left bank shaft, camshaft with the subshaft making this both subshaft. The wipe clean with the gauge must indicate less than 0.005 of an inch. Number 2, idler gear with the left link of the camshaft drive gear must be applied with the backshift backlash reading between the number 2 idler gear with the camshaft drive gear. If the gauge is not available to see the data surface limits, 11, if the dimension is not within limit, generally tap the subshaft of the bracket until it is properly positioned. Caution, do not tap the machine surface with the subshaft bracket. When the subshaft bracket is positioned, but properly positioned, tighten the top of the center mounting bolt to the proper torque with the recheck for the backlash between the idler gear gauge for the crankshaft gear. If the backlash is not within the proper limit, the 3 vertical mounting bolts must be loosened. Step 7 through 12 repeated into 14. Remove the idler gauge and apply with the retaining of the remaining subshaft mounting bolts in the washer. Note: 1/3 inch 24 bolt is used the edge of the subshaft bracket directly below the lube oil manifold connection with the subshaft bracket. Alright, figure 7.7 show the ideal idler gear stub shaft bracket alignment. The figures gauge file 769, and remove the 2 temporary locating pins with applying with the 2 main mounting bolts of the washer. Tighten all the mounting bolts with the proper torque. Ream the dial 2 dial for the 494 thousandths of an inch. Tamper the reamer to 4,998 10,000 inch or 2 10,000 inch bottom of the remainder of the white using the cutting oil. If the dowel is in the idler gear stub shaft of the bracket, do not align with the crank rest with the drill with the remainder of the overside of the dowel with the remove the produce the full circumference C parts for the catalog listing oversize the dowel with the use of the arrow with the blow chip with the oil out of the dowel holes. Insert 5/16 to 24 bolts approximately 12.7 millimeters or 1/2 inch into the dowel pins. Place the dowel in the dowel holes in the subshaft bracket to drive it into the crankcase end plate. The torque of the dowel bolts at 70 foot-pounds. The torque of the lock wire at all mounting dowel bolts in the groups of 3 or less. Until using number 1 subshaft, number 2 subshaft gauge. For check the parallelism between number 1 and number 2 subshaft. Figure 7.8. Take the 1 indicator reading with the gauge is close to the subshaft. Bracket is possibly the other reading with the gauge near the end of the number 1 subshaft. The dial indicator reading of the must be within 4,000ths of an inch. Parallelism may also be checked with applying with both idler gear. Check with the gear teeth, the message with the tacking backlash measurement, the strip of the data from the backlashing limits for the gauge 770. 7 7.5 shows checking parallelism number 1 and number 2 subshaft. After doubling the idler subshaft bracket, it has been applied with the crankcase rear shaft and sheet with all the Borg's torque. The assembly should be checked for the gaps exceeding the 4,000 inch, which could cover the critical loss for the oil pressure. To perform the check, running 4,000 inch feeler gauge around the periphery of the bracket. If the feeler gauge can be inserted with the oil patch of the bracket, must be removed. They call the eliminated. Recheck the dimension between the number 2 idler with the subshaft, the last blank of the camshaft subshaft. Number 1 idler gear application. Apply the light coat with lubricating oil with the number 1 idler gear subshaft plate for the idler gear on the subshaft with the 2 position marked in line with the shown figure 721. If the new gear is used to refer to the exhaust valve time and again for the section with the information positioning, the marking with the gear's time, the procedure required for the camshaft with the crankshaft, the position have been disturbed. Then install the number 1 idler gear with the exhaust plate, hardened washer bolts, and the tightener bolt with the proper the torque and the lock wire and the part pairs for the using crisscross pattern. The feeler gauge to check with the number 1 idler gear thrust clearance is within the limited specified in the sort of the data. Recheck the backlash between the camshaft and crankshaft gear with the number 1 idler gear with the step 7 with the subshaft bracket application. Piston cooling, flanges, and lube oil manifold application. In the flange governed with the piston cooling of the manifold opens with the crankcase end plate with the bed has been removed and install the flange gasket flange with 3/8 inch 24 bolt. Figure 7.9 torque with the bolt of the 27 foot-pounds of torque lock wire. Figure 7.9 shows the lube oil manifold application. From the top, lube oil manifold lock wire anchor bolts and piston cooling manifold flanges. Assemble the end of the center line of the manifold section between being sure that the install of the gasket between them 3/8 inch 24 bolt lock nuts and tighten the 27 foot-pounds of torque. Install the previously assembled the manifold section with the subshaft left bank to the camshaft and oil line with the figure 7.9 being sure for the place for the gasket under the manifold section. Tighten the 3/8 inch 24 bolt 27 foot-pounds of torque lock wire and the subshaft left of the bank of the camshaft manifold does not have the height of the gate plug with the install with the cover of the threading high temperature thread compound with the install of the manifold. Install the 2 1/2 inch 20 bolts. Tighten to the 65 foot-pounds of torque with the 3s both below you with the anchor bolt lock wire and camshaft device and drive through the housing of the crankcase bolt. Camshaft driving housing. Camshaft drive housing seal surface with the burrs and wipe free of the dust and dirt. Apply with the coat of the gasket seal with the camshaft drive housing. Apply with the gasket and section from the camshaft drive housing. Be sure with the gasket interlock with the joint properly. Apply the crankshaft drive gear housing crankshaft. Apply the housing and the wipe of the crankcase on the plate clean. Trim the rubber crankcase for the oil pan gasket extending for the joint of the crankcase and with the plate with the apply with the Permatex in the joint area. Locate the crankshaft drive housing in the proper position. Snug it down with the several of the bolts with the hold in place 7 to 10 to act in position point of the dial indicator. Install the camshaft driving housing aligned with the gauge on the left bank of the camshaft. The subshaft. Sweep the left bank of the locating pin. Figure 710. The camshaft drives housing properly aligned at 8,000 to 10,000 an inch reading of the train with the dial indicator. 710 show the camshaft drive housing alignment with the cage 771. Repeat step 7 on the right bank camshaft stab shaft. Install the housing not aligned with the proper. If the housing is not aligned properly, place the wedge between the camshaft subshaft bracket and the housing. Drive the wedge in the brass hammer. If the dial indicator show the camshaft driver housing is properly aligned, to be properly aligned, torque the mounting bolt to the proper torque. Then remove the wedge and recheck the alignment. Remove the 2 dial within the camshaft drive housing at 494 thousandths of an inch. Tamper the ream over the 4,998 thousandths. 10,000ths of an inch or 10,000 of an inch bottom ream over being secured with the cutting oil. If the dowel holes of the camshaft driving housing does not align with the holes of the crankcase drill with the ream with the oversight of the dowels required to reduce the flow of the circumference fit with the see the parts of the catalog with the lifting of the oversight of the dowels. Using arrows to blow the chips and oil out of the dowel holes, insert the 5/16 of an inch, 24 bolts approximately 1/2 inch within the dowel plate for the dowels and the holes in the housing of the driver with the crankcase and end plate with remove the dowel bolts. Install the 2 remaining camshaft driver with the mounting bolts with the holes next to the dowel with the pins and torque with the specified torque. 15. Lock wire camshaft driving housing upper bolt for 3 groups for 3 each for the 2 of the remaining bolt mounting bolts of the 2 bolts with the previously installed the end plate with the anchor and over the lock wire. 16. Install the remaining manifold section beginning with the strip of the apply of the gear of the gasket, prop the gasket between the manifold, the crankcase between the manifold section previously installed, the one being applied with the lock nuts of the bolts with the connection with the 2 section lock wire manifold crankcase bolt with the if the turbocharger filter is not installed at the time of the temporary bolt with the spacer should be applied with the filter mounting bolts. Install the oil slinger and the oil slinger with the crankshaft gear bolts. 19. 18. Prior to the installation, oil seal retain the measurement of the distance for the interface for the retaining mounting with the interface for the retainer tap with the flange for the 7 tube for the mesh for the distance for the outer face for the camshaft driving house with the face of the oil slinger with the crankshaft position with the torque of the rear of the engine with the difference between the 2 measurements should equal the clearance to specify the shape of the tab the required remove the oil slinger to the shim to obtain the clearance. If the 19. If the oil retainer of the dowels, remove the dowels. Apply the oil retainer gasket oil retainer and install the 4 equally spaced bolts with the washer finger with the tight and center of the retainer with the tamper the outside hammer with the softer face hammer with the out and until the radial clearance between the out retaining inside the diameter of the gearing sealing out of surface to outside diameter of the uniform of the round the circumference measured with the feeler gauge refer to the surface of the tab with the proper radial clearance apply the remainder of the 24 bolts with the washer of the torque of the 30 foot-pounds of torque. Recheck for the uniform clearance to ensure that the retainer is not shifted and apply the camshaft drive gear with the spring drive gear with the assembly of the previously described. Alright, auxiliary drive assembly description. The auxiliary drive assembly figure 711 is mounted with the turbocharged housing, the driven with the bank of the camshaft drive gear. Shows the figure 711 shows the figure auxiliary drive assembly with 1 coupling flange, the 2 the dust gauge, dust shield, 3 the cover, the 4 oil slinger, 5 the mounting billet, 6 is the drive shaft gear assembly, 7 is the support housing, 8 is the drain housing. Drain and number of 9 is the bushing. Maintenance. When bearings are installed with the precedent of the supporting housing, the line reamed and bored with the dimensions specified in the surface after the mounting with the assembly turbocharging housing of the backlash between the gears must be checked and adjusted if necessary. Check the backlash with the dial indicator figure 712 with this attached to some small C-clamp with the coupling flange with the clamp with the contact with the outer edge of the flange. Position the clamp with the dial indicator the contact point of the clamp and touching with the C-clamp with the removing the plate with the gear teeth with the touch turning the coupling of the flange dial indicator with the 0 the move of the flange opposite direction with the previous movement of the note over the reading of the dial indicator. Figure 712 the checking the auxiliary drive gear of the backlash dial indicator C-clamp with the refer to the surface of that the back limit of the backlash adjust the loosening of the turbocharged mounting both of the reposition the turbocharger on the camshaft of the driving housing. After the correct backlash is obtained with the turbocharger mounting bolts with the tightened backlash check with the C if it does not change check camshaft assembly. Description of the camshaft assembly figure 712 13 sorry 7 713 consists of the flange segment of the front and rear stub shaft with the spacers is used in 12, 16, and 28 cylinder engines between the center of the segment. Each segment spans through 12 cylinder, 4, 8, and 16 cylinder, and 5 20 cylinders. Segment flanges are marked with the shown figure 713 to 8 with the correct assembly. Each of the cylinder of these two exhaust cams, 1 injector cam, 2 bearing journals, 2 bearing blocks on each of the cylinder, equipped with the sealed back lead, the base, babbitt, inline inserts, and support the camshaft. Our figure 713, the camshaft assembly of the 16-cylinder, show the bottom part show the injector cam, the exhaust valve cam, the long segment, the journal, the spacer, the stub shaft. All right, they show the left and right bank on the drive end with the long segment of the stub shaft, then A and B from 16 to 8, and 15 to 7, that's 14 to 6, and then 13 to 5, then A and B, and B and A, and on the other side of the A to B, spacers 12 to 4, 11 to 3, 10 to 2, 9 to 1, B to A, and sub shafts. Maintenance removal. The camshaft may be removed without distributing the subshaft. Remove the dowel point bolts connected with the subshaft segment of the subshaft flange. Remove the oil line with the segment of the bearing block with the rocker arms. Remove the rocker arms. Remove the segment bearing with the block black cap with the valve with the camshaft. Remove the camshaft. Remove them. Reason other than bearing replacement attempt should be made with retain the relative position of the bearing of the shell of the reinstall of the camshaft. The bay may be accomplished immediately. Replacing the cap of the camshaft. The removal of the entire block. The remove the insert the block of the block bolts of the wire of the free ends of the bolt. If possible, to remove the segment of the 16-20 cylinder camshaft without removing the entire camshaft. Over the entire camshaft must be removed within the 12-cylinder engine for the change of the segment inspection. After removal of the camshaft, the wash and remove all the dirt with the oil. Pass it visually inspect the subshaft with the segment part repair, paying particular attention to the cam lobe, the journal of the pitting of the tripping of the excessive scoring or heat discoloration. Journal of the cams with light pay with the remarks of the minute with the flat spot with the light score with the marks. It must be reused after blending of the removal of the sharp edges by. Pan polishing, check and set with the dowel bolt holes for the burrs and remove the camshaft segment. The subshafts show that how the heat discoloration showed to be manifest instead. Inspecting the hardening test of discoloration, unfinished portion of the camshaft should be disregarded with the result of the production process that may be seen even with the new camshaft assembly. The camshaft must be assembled as shown in figure 7 to 13 on one of the dowel bolt with each of the segment flames with the small other than a hole, other to ensure the correct angular position. The assembly of the camshaft subshaft check with the eccentrically between the cam subshaft and camshaft journal with the maximum run out over the total length of the shaft. The support of the camshaft on the precision rollers at the number 2 and 7 on the 8 cylinder, 1 6 and 7 on the 12 with the 12 cylinder, 1 7 and 10 and 16 on the 16 cylinder, 1 9 and 12 and 20 on the 20 cylinder. Camshaft bearing journal C that serve the data for the limited installation. Camshaft assembly installed with the engine must be conformed with the segment sequence position indicated in figure 713 with on the right bank for the camshaft with the A marking on each of the flange forward to the front of the engine, on left bank camshaft with the B marking on the flange must be toward the front of the engine. Stub camshaft connected to the segment flange with the A mark with a different configuration with those connected with the segment flange B mark with the check of the segment with the general bearing clearance with the thrust of the clearance with the rear stub shaft. Limits are listed in the surface of the tab with the clearance measurement that can be obtained with the failure gauge upper insulation, the replacement of the camshaft and lubricating freely all the moving parts, placing the assembly properly aligned position of the replacing the block for the bearing with the remove the rotate the camshaft to check of the binding with the apply the flange dowel bolts for the reassemble of the rocker part arm associated with the part check the valve time with at least one cylinder check the segment of the positioning of the time, then mark the other adjustments such as the exhaust valve and setting the injector timing. The camshaft, the counterweight replacement usually is not necessary. However, the counterweight is installed that should be applied with the positioning edge shown in figure 714. Alright, this shows the 8 cylinders. X is 184 degrees, X is 249 with 1.5, X is 16 cylinder 105 inches. X is 149.5 inches on the 20 cylinder. Shows by the counterweight described in line pair while the engine and center line of the engine. Center line the direction of rotation X, place straight edge for the check. Front of the camshaft counterweight of the rear camshaft the counterweights of the down top dead center of the number 1 cylinder position of the 1 crankshaft. X of the degrees of the top center for the number 1 cylinder. To get the cranking of the F in the position, turn the flywheel until the number is in point. Exhaust valve type and the description. Exhaust valve time is very important to ensure the correct relation for the valve operation without the events of the cylinder power cycle. The check with the adjustment of the exhaust valve timing. It is necessary to know how the top of the dead center of each of the cylinders shown in table 1. Here you have your firing order for the 8-cylinder. 1 is 0, 5 is 45, now 3 is 90, 7 is 135, 4 is 180, 8 is 225, and 2 is 273, 6 is 315. Firing order for the 12-cylinder. 1 is 0, 12 is 19, 7 is 45, 4 is 94, 3 is 120, 10 is 139, 9 is 165, 5 is 214, 2 is 240, 11 is 259, 8 is 285. 16-cylinder. 1 is 0 degrees, 8 is 22 and a half degrees, 9 is 45 degrees, 16 is 61 and 67 and a half, 3 is 90 degrees, 6 is 11, 112 and 1/2 degrees, 11 is 135 degrees, 14 is 157 and 1/20. 4 is 180 degrees, 5 is 202 the 1.5 degrees, 12 is 2250. 13 is 247 with a 1/2 degree, with the 2 is 270 degrees, the 7 is 292 with a 1/2 degree, the 10 is 315. 15 is 337 and a half. Firing order for the 20-cylinder. 1 is 0, 19 is 9, 8 is 36, 11 is 45, 5 is 72, 18 is 81, 7 is 108, 15 is 11, 117, 2 is 144, 17 is 153, 18 is 180, 12 is 10 is 180, 12 is 189, 3 is 216, 20 is 225, 6 is 252, and 13 is 261. Each of the item with the correct governing time, correct valve timing are given with the following procedure. Maintenance locating the top dead center. This should become the necessary to check the position with the flywheel pointed for the top dead center. Proceed as follows. Move the airbox handhold the cover the numbered 1 cylinder. If necessary, bar for the engine for the position numbered 1 position below the cylinder points. If the insert of the brass and stop bar for the minimum of a half-inch hexagonal square preferred to the suitable length of the support through the ports of the numbered 1 cylinder, so that the end of the bar passes through the port of the opposite cylinder of the figure 715. 715 show the stop bar inserted with the cylinder ports. Note that the bar is sufficient length to prevent the reapplication of the handhold cover of the bars and is replaced again. The flag of the end of the bar will cause him against the inadvertent rotation of the engine with the bar in place. Manually the bar engine slowly in the normal direction rotation until the piston travels the top of the bar against the upper surface of the cylinder ports. Figure 716. Figure 716 shows the piston traveling in this, by the stop bar. Caution you with extreme care to avoid excessive force. Mark the piston position of the flywheel pointer on the flywheel, figure 717. Figure 717 shows the limit of the piston travel to mark down the flywheel. Manual bar engine slowly opposite of the direction of normal rotation piston travel the engine and stop of the bar against the upper surface of the cylinder port. 7 mark the second position of the flywheel pointer on the flywheel. Figure 718. 718 second limit of the position travel to mark down the flywheel. Alright, determine the number of the edges between the two marks of the flywheel. Divide the number by 2. See the figure 719 with the sample calculations. 180 A, B, and D. Number 1 crank pin. 144 to 182, 114. Mark flywheel is indicated in step 5. Mark flywheel indicated in step 7. C, determine the number of the degrees indicated in step 8 and divided by 2. 214 divided by 144 is, minus 144 is 70. 70 divided by 2 is 35 degrees. Rotate the 35 degrees from pointer should indicate 180 degrees. If it does not adjust the pointer to 180 degrees. Rotate the crankshaft in the normal direction. Rotation the exact number of the degrees determined in step 8 with remove the brass stop bar over the engine. 10. The pointer should indicate the 180 degrees bottom dead center, but it does not position the pointer so that the dial does not indicate the 180 degrees. Pointer will now indicate the top dead center for the number 1 crank pin, which the engine rotate with its point as 0 degrees. Crankshaft engine exhaust valve timing. Check the timing plate for the dial indicator on the rocker arm. Adjusting screw with shown in figure 720 with the valve at the end of the rocker arm must be highest position so that the exhaust valve will choke low with the press of the indicator down approximately 1/100 of an inch, or 1/10 of an inch. Set dial there at 0. Turn the crankshaft in the normal direction rotation until the at 106 degrees at top dead center of the cylinder at the beginning. Check the timing so correct with the valve bridge will be removed down to 14 thousandths of an inch. Timing must not be not later. And 110 degrees earlier for the 140 degrees at top dead center of the cylinder being checked. The figure 720 shows the timing exhaust valves. Timing is not correct. If it is incorrect, check for the proper installation of the camshaft. Camshaft gear train correctly timed. Excessive worn of gears. Exhaust valve should be timed to any gear with the subshaft, camshaft, the gear train that's replaced with the exemption of number 1 and number 2 idler gear. To do this, camshaft within each of the banks must be timed to the crankshaft, but only one cylinder each of the bank that need to be timed. To prevent the possible valve damage, remove the loosen all rocker assemblies except the one cylinder being timed. If the rocker assemblies are removed, the hydraulic glass should be checked for the proper clearance of the valve stem. See with section 5 of the instructions. Apply the dial indicator with the rocker arm, adjusting the screw figure 720 of the dome with the checking the exhaust valve. Timely remove the dial pull bolts from the camshaft, the counterweight. Remove the counterweight with the gear, and with the camshaft can be rotated by placing a socket with a wrench on the flange bolt. Rotate the camshaft in the normal direction over the rotation of the valve bridge from which the dial indicators remove the boat moved 14,000 of an inch. Turn the crankshaft in the normal direction. Rotation flywheel point of the 105 degrees after the top dead center for the check for the cylinder being checked with the install of the camshaft gear with the counterweight on the subshaft. Do not tighten the bolts at this time. While the flywheel is at 105 degrees at top dead center, the cylinder being checked with the dial hole for the camshaft with the drive gear counterweight with the camshaft should be lined with approximately at line with either of the turning crankshaft at 140 to 160 degrees at a top dead center of the dial holes that may be lined up with the bottoms should be tightened. If the dial holes do not line up with the tolerance, remove the camshaft counterweight with the gear with the subshaft, rotate the gear with the 180 degrees, replace the subshaft, move the gear with one pulley tooth, replace the gear with the counterweight with the subshaft. If the dial still does not line up with the misalignment less than 75 to 10,000 of an inch, if the hole of the man be installed the 5,000 to 10,000 of an inch or 15,000 oversized dial. Misalignment of the dial holes greater than 75 to 10,000 of an inch. Proceed to step 17. Install the 5/16 to 24-inch bolts approximately a half inch in the dial pins. Place the dials in dial holes drive into the same subshaft. Remove the dial bolts from the pins. Remove the counterweight with the subshaft as the bolts. Install the dial retainer bolt plate with the counterweight with the subshaft bolts with the torque at 90 foot-pounds of torque. Install the dial pin bolts at torque at 17 foot-pounds of torque. Lock wire mounting bolts, dial bolts in the group of 3. The 2 mounting bolts of one of the dial bolt. The crankshaft should now be rotated with the normal direction. Timing check for the valve bridge for the valve being checked has moved down to 14,000 of an inch when the flywheel is time pointer of the 104 to 106 A top dead center. Repeat the operation for the one cylinder of the opposite bank after the timing has been completed with the relative of the position of the mating of the parts that should be identified with a similar method used for the new engine with the shown in figure 721. Mating part for the marks for the number 1 position, the top dead center. Complete the valve timing procedure. Remove the counterweight with the gear of the subshaft. Plug with the dial hole for the subshaft with the valve. Drill the tap of the 2 dial hole for the 3/4 inch 3/16 NF thread of the minor diameter of 5 thousandths. 0.7031 inches plus or minus 5 thousandths or 0.000 of an inch pitch diameter of 7,000 94 10,000 of an inch over the 16 thousandths for the an inch. Countersink the 1/16 evenly and greater mounting solid. Drive the thread or the hex head plugs into the hole for the surface of the data plug part number to cut the plug head off the flare of the peening into the countersink. Grind plug flush on the flange face. Check 5 inches 749 or 7,495 10,000 an inch plus or minus 1,000 an inch outside diameter. The high spots grinding proper dimensions. Caution: the camshaft with the crankshaft relationship has been disturbed. Repeat steps 3:19. Apply with the camshaft with the camshaft, the gear, the subshaft, the screw within the mounting bolts. And 20. Rotate the engine crankshaft the position indicated in figure 714. 721. Remove the gear mounting of the position with the gear of the position the gear of the counterweights on the subshaft with the counterweight down with the position with the counterweight. Scribe line with the line pair with the engine center line with the trim the gear counterweight with the dial hole with the line. Install the mounting bolt with the screw of the counterweight subshaft. 23. Drill and reach subshaft with the hole with it 12 points or 0.4985 of an inch plus or minus 5 thousandths of an inch. Perform steps 8 through 16. Alright, backing out of this. This is your camshaft gear train. Starting from the bottom, you shoot with the crankshaft gear with the crankshaft gear marking. Number 1 idler gear with the crankshaft gear marking. Number 1 idler and number 2 idler gear marking. Number 2 idler gear left bank camshaft drive gear marking. The left bank rear with the counter rear counterweight with the subshaft marking. The camshaft drive gear marking. The right bank counter weight subshaft marking. Alright, moving on to Camshaft gear training auxiliary drive with camshaft assembly. The clearance dimension for the lister with the defined as follows. The new limits are those with which new parts are manufactured. Drawing tolerances, minimum and maximum tolerance measurement that provides the surface limit, the time to rebuild any time with an unscheduled measure. If the performance surface limits should not exceed the components of these limits, but not may be used to ensure the performance is satisfactory until the next scheduled overhaul. Camshaft gear oil slinger oil retainers of 90 to 110 thousandths of an inch. Slim shim obtained with the clearance 10,000, 20,000, 30 thousandths. Oil retainer ID crankshaft gear sealing surface with 15,000, 20,000 of an inch. Camshaft drive gear 2,000 of an inch gear camshaft. The camshaft gear is number one idler new, the number one idler, the number two idler on spring drive gear assembly new, the new number two idler drive spring drive gear assembly, the camshaft drive gear new, the camshaft drive gear, the camshaft driver new, the auxiliary drive to the camshaft gear new, maximum all gears above, the turbocharger drive gear new, and the maximum gear train idler gear for the subshaft idler include the sleeve of the bearings with the applicable number one idler gear assembly through the bolt of the fixed bearing subshaft assembly. Idler gear bore diameter new and maximum subshaft diameter new and new and minimum. Idler gear and subshaft clearance new and maximum. Thrust clearance new and maximum. Number two gear idler assembly parts for the spring drive gear assembly. The idler gear bore diameter. New maximum subshaft diameter, new and minimum idler gear subshaft clearance, new and maximum thrust gear, new and maximum auxiliary drive housing pilot diameter, new and minimum bearing diameter supporting housing after lining, reaming, new and maximum thrust and dimension, new and minimum drive shaft bearing diameter, new and minimum thrust diameter, thrust dimension, new and maximum clearance of the shaft bushing, new and maximum thrust, new maximum cam and subshaft camshaft journal diameter, new and minimum diametric clearance and segmented journal to the bearing, new and maximum. Alright, your surface data of the clamshaft gear assembly drives clamshaft assembly, tape of the length of the journal maximum, the round out TIR where it's supported adjacent journals maximum run out base circle relatively to the journal maximum mounting flange, not convex flat with within the maximum mounting flange of the square with the longitudinal center line with the TIR maximum. The asterisk stands for correct by the grinding face with the concentric between the subshaft and the camshaft journal with the maximum run out over the length of the shaft of the TIR maximum. Dowel bolt hole of the flange, one hole, three hole of the subshaft journal diameter, new and minimum diametric clearance of the journal to new maximum subshaft. And thus clearance new maximum dimension throw face of the maximum chemistry of the timing, idle timing, the setting valve opening of the 14,000 inch A top dead center, time the new gear for the train not earlier than the maximum, or the 14,000 valve at the A top dead center, limited lag camshaft behind the crankshaft due to the worn gear's maximum, or 14,000 valve at the top dead center of the flywheel pointer of the top dead center for the number one cylinder. Equipment list: the feeler gauge set with the camshaft subshaft plug number 1 idler gear clearance check gas checking spring, dial indicator Loctite cleaner the activator with 170 degrees or grams or 6 ounces number 1 idler gear clearance of the checking bar, Loctite sealing compound 250 cc bottle number 1 idler gear with the camshaft gauge, idler gear subshaft the camshaft subshaft gauge number 1 subshaft number 2 subshaft gauge, camshaft drive housing alignment gauge, camshaft drive housing alignment gauge wedge. And that completes section 7.